Hi and welcome to another episode of The Art of Engineering. In today's episode we're going to be building an amplifier. Now I know people that have been viewing this channel will probably know that most of my content is QRP based and homebrew based, but I am not religiously QRP. I quite often take my TS520 out for a spin. That'll do up to 120 watts. I normally never take it over 50 watts. And I do like the option of being able to go higher in power. Up until now, none of my gear, apart from the TS520, was capable of more than 5 watts. So that got me looking at the QRP Labs site. And if you haven't been to QRP Labs, please link below to the site. Here's some amazing kits. You don't have to be a kit builder. You can order a finished product, but great gear, and hence me building a lot of the equipment. I've got QRP Labs gear. That's a 160 meter QCX Plus. This is my QDX data transceiver. It does FT8 and data modes. And of course, this is the QMX 12 band data and CW, and it will very shortly with a firmware upgrade also do single sideband. An amazing piece of gear. You can buy a miniature version of this. It's 5 bands. The gear is just absolutely amazing. Even though the place is called QRP Labs, Hans Summers is of the understanding that there are sometimes those occasions where you would like to go a little bit higher in power, especially if you're at home. And so what he's done is he's made a single band amplifier. You could convert it to make it multi-band, but at the moment, to save cost, and it is really, really cheap, I'll put the price just here in US dollars. So I ended up buying that kit, and in this episode I will be constructing it, and I'll be using it as an amplifier for my QCX Mini. I'll just grab that. So this is the QCX Mini. It's a single band transceiver for CW. An absolute amazing thing. Look at the size of it. How cute is that? You can take this out, soda, poda, even operate it from home. And the idea is I'll be able to plug a 50 watt amplifier into this and make it a really nice home station. The other plan is to take my QMX Plus transceiver and operate that on 40 meters, both FT8 and CW, and see if that works. And of course, the QDX data transceiver. Look at that. It's small as a deck of cards, and it does, I think it's 5 bands, and you can buy high band versions and lower band versions of it, etc., etc. So I plan on operating this, and obviously the amplifier only does 40 meters. So the plan is to build the amplifier, use it on the QCX, and then also use it on data on the QDX and the QMX as well. A little caveat, FT8 is a high duty cycle mode. Basically that means it's kind of like holding the key down and never lifting it up. It's continuously transmitting, or virtually continuously transmitting, so it really does work the finals in a rig quite rigorously. Maybe more rigorously than was intended originally before the mode was invented. So what I'm going to do is the amplifier will operate off 20 volts, which coincidentally is what your average laptop charger uses, and people have those lying all around the house. So to produce the 50 watts, the idea is to run it off 20 volts. And if I'm running at FT8, I'll plug in the 13 or 12 volt supply that I've got in the shack, and that will then lower the wattage of the amplifier to about 20 or 30 watts, which means you're just not straining it so much and you're less likely to blow the finals. Anyway, enough of me blabbing on. Let's get on with the video. So it's Saturday afternoon, got up this morning, smashed out the mowing, got the garden beds prepared for spring so we can do some planting, get some lovely fresh veggies happening. I did the edges on Friday afternoon, so it wouldn't be such an arduous chore to get all this done, and that's because this weekend, at least on Sunday, I'm going to start building. Now, some people will say that, you know, you shouldn't have too much junk, but for me, this is just treasure. We've got some enclosures that we can use for projects. We had all of this wiring, an old computer power supplies, all that good stuff that I used to find in my old job when I was at the university. And of course, the power supply that we will need needs to be around 19 volts to get the amplifier up to the 40 watts. Otherwise, if you run it on 13.8, you're only going to be looking at 20 or 30 watts. And I think by the specs on the back of this, we're looking at about up to 6 amps at 19 and a bit volts. So this Dell power supply is going to be a wonderful thing to get my amplifier up to the wattage that it can do. And it even comes with a jack on the end and a ferrite bead to stop RFI from getting up to the amp. So this is just a really nice find. I'm assuming it works. I'm going to find hopefully the plug for it, and if I can't find that plug, I think I've got a couple of other supplies in here that I'll be able to use. But fingers crossed I can use this one. Yeah, baby. We have found the plug. So we are going to be able to use this power supply. And it's a power supply for our amplifier. Thank you, Dell. Unfortunately not sponsored by them.
You leave those eggs alone, you nasty crow. Get out of it.
And so it begins. This is the stuff I'm going to need to assemble my amplifier. I got this case by accident. I actually started buying stuff and I didn't realise I'd checked this box and I didn't uncheck it. So this was sitting in my parts bin for quite a while. And so, well, we've got the case. I thought maybe I could use it for something else, but then I thought, well, what the heck? Let's order the amps.
A wide range antenna tuner. The genome of this tuner, but it quickly tunes up my 40 meter.
What a great way to spend a Sunday afternoon.
40, so here around 15 meters. Let's hit the tune button.
And that is the progress thus far.
Meters.
We're taking it slowly. You've got to make sure you wind these toroids correctly. We are making some good progress here. We now have it installed in the case. You had to use a little bit of tape to hold the silicon pads in place, and it was a bit fiddly. I'm going to check to make sure that we haven't got shorted out IRF 510s. That is the lid, and that is how it all looks once it's inside the case. So it looks really, really snazzy. I'm probably going to fire this up on 13.8 volt supply to begin with, and then we'll try and get our 20 volt supply operating with it. Just need to do a quick continuity test on the IRF 510, make sure it's not shorted out, do a few other little checks, and then we should be good to go. Well, this is a little bit exciting. We've got our backlight now switched off so that we can actually see what's going on. To the right of the frequency displays, you can see a P, and that means that we're in practice mode, which means when we hit transmit, the push to talk is activated, so that'll activate the amp, but we're not putting anything into the amp because what we're trying to do is set the bias current for these FETs that are in here. And obviously we want to set it when there's no input coming in. So that is the next thing we need to do. So I just need to make sure that my cable is actually going to activate this and that no smoke comes out when we plug it in. I've also removed the barrel connector from that power supply that I showed you earlier in the video. And we're getting 20 volts DC, which is marvelous. I will eventually attach this to the end of this, but before we do that, we need to put a current meter in line to measure quiescent current. And we also need to make sure on this amplifier that this is counterclockwise fully, so we've got the bias as low as it'll go. And then hopefully we can adjust that bias and off we go. Well, this is a promising sign. We've got the green light. We're powering this off the laptop charger. This is coming off my shack supply at 13.8 volts, so it's slightly less. It's actually 12 volts. I've got it set up so that we drop the voltage down because QRP Labs stuff doesn't like much over 13 volts, so I always try to err on the side of caution. So now what we need to do is adjust our quiescent current so we know it's working. And we also know that if the power is disconnected, listen to the static drop when I disconnect the power from the laptop. It may take a little while because, in fact, let's just take the jack out. That would probably be a better way of doing it. Quiet. So we need the power supplied to this amplifier for the antenna to be connected to the receiver. So that is an interesting feature or something to look out for. But we will now try and adjust our quiescent current. Hopefully we can get that working. Forgot to tell you too, I'm just using a standard auxiliary cable between the push to talk on this and transmit on the amplifier. So standard cable, boom boom, off it goes. So I think that's all working like it should. Let's get the meter in series. Now, the first time I tried to connect this, I forgot to move my positive terminal over here to microamps and milliamps. You really need to do that if you're measuring current. Tricks for new players and dummies like me. So we will plug in our power and hit transmit, and hopefully we see some quiescent current happening. Hopefully it comes on as well. Yes, that is working. That's a good sign. We're looking at 21.56 milliamps of current. What happens when we hit transmit? 109. My understanding, we advance this in a clockwise direction until we see an increase. So we back it off. So in quiescent condition, we're looking at 109. That's it there. And back it off. Okay, well, hopefully that is now working. 21.6 without the key down 111, and it's not going up. So that is a good sign. Let's get this out of practice mode, get the meter on the actual ATU power meter, and have a look and see how many watts we're getting out into the dummy load. So we've sorted out power supply issues. I'm going to be really careful because I've got to get this power supply cords done so that it's not going to short out and I'm going to blow my power supply, laptop power supply. But watch this. It's about 45 odd watts. 45 watts. Does what it says it'll do. A little over 20 volts would probably get me up to the 50, but I am more than happy with 45 watts out of this little thing. Let's get the lid on it, let's get the power supply cord sorted, and let's put it into operation. And just so that I don't plug this into any of my QRP gear, I have flagged this, but I'm going to try and make sure that that never happens, maybe. So the bands are pretty lackluster tonight, but this is the setup. Got my J38 key, my QCX 40 meters, and the brand new 50 watt amplifier, and it's actually giving me 50 watts. I'll just show you on the power now. 50 watts, about halfway. Get a load of this. Check it out, 50 on the dot. Hans is nothing if not accurate. Well, he's a lot of other things too. He's a genius, but yeah, 50 watts as promised. And this, folks, is my go-to Kiwi SDR. It's the VK5ARG public SDR receiver at Tarlee, South Australia. It's a broadband monopole antenna. It is just an amazing receiver. It's 1100 kilometers away, and I've been to light this up with like 400 milliwatts. So just get a load of this now, see how amazing this is. I am thoroughly impressed with the sound of that. Copy this QD key. This is the decode on the QRP QCX Mini. QD key made from hack saw well, I'm receiving it pretty well here. It's a rainy Thursday and we have just hooked up the QMX Plus to the QRP Labs 50 watt amplifier. I've got that on 12 volts and it's giving me roughly 35 watts, and that is my first DX QSO, which was a K7 IOC in the States. I tried changing the firmware in my QDX transceiver and just made the assumption that the firmware wasn't going to work because it was a very old version, but having a look on Hans' site, he's adamant that this radio should work on the latest and the greatest firmware and it should be backwards compatible, no problem at all. So I am going to give it another go and see if I can get this to work as well, because it annoys me that it has a push to talk on the back but that I couldn't get it to work. Well, we're going to try and connect with PuTTY terminal to see if we can get the parameters right and get that push to talk working. There you go, we're into configurations. This is looking a lot more promising. Last time this data here was very corrupted. I've now enabled the pin 5 push to talk 5 volts is enabled for no, wrong band, I need to do it on 40 meters. And I've disabled transmit on here anyway. So we'll put that to disabled, jump across and go enabled, and that should see us right. Hopefully the push to talk works now, we shall see. Well, here's a trick for dumb players, and I am such a goofball. I had my push to talk jack stuck in here and I thought maybe it wasn't a stereo jack and that's why it wasn't accommodating the whole thing. What I need to do is just push it in properly. It wasn't seated correctly. So now if I hit T on here, you just watch the light, because it was just coming on very dimly. Watch what happens when I push T now. Yes, it's giving me full power, which is awesome. So I'm going to get back on and see if I can get this to work. Well, here's a trick for dumb players, and I am such a goofball. I had my push to talk jack stuck in here and I thought maybe it wasn't a stereo jack and that's why it wasn't accommodating the whole thing. What I need to do is just push it in properly. It wasn't seated correctly. So now if I hit T on here, you just watch the light, because it was just coming on very dimly. Watch what happens when I push T now. Yes, it's giving me full power, which is awesome. So I'm going to get back on and see if I can get this to work. And there you have it, folks. I'm attempting a call to VK3 and it's giving me 35 watts. Let's see if we get anything. About to decode. Yep, +8, which we would expect, and that's the 35 watts. So the amp is working on my QDX transceiver as well. So that is it. We've used it on the QMX Plus, we've used it on the QDX. For both of these, as I said, we're running it on 12 volts at 35 watts. This is something that Hans does not recommend. So you do this at your own peril. I put my hand on the heatsink. It doesn't feel like it's getting hot. I probably, maybe I would risk running it at 70 watts, but I'm not going to, because I really want this amp to be used for CW applications more than anything else. Well, thanks for sticking around right to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed the QRP Labs 50 watt amplifier. I think it's a really great amplifier, single band, but it's so cheap you could probably buy a few for your favourite bands and just pop them on the bench and plug them in when you need them. Just have them labelled so it's clear which one is which. And like I said, for FD8, if you're using a QRP Labs transceiver like the QMX or the QCX, you might want to wind it back. And certainly Hans has said that this amplifier is intended for the QCX series of transceivers. So if you use it for data, you're doing it at your own risk. It's one day till the holidays. Tomorrow is my last day of term, and then I have 2 blissful weeks of ham radio play. So expect to see either some longer videos or lots of home brewing happening. 73, and I shall see you in the next episode of The Art of Engineering.